Alright, hello everyone, how are you doing? Let me close this. Construction work going on nearby, so I can hear everything that they're doing. Let me get my YouTube channel up so I can see your comments. See what's funny about that construction site? So it's nearby, and they're building like a new apartment complex or something, I don't know. But the thing is that they used to start at like 9 a.m. every morning, and then they'd be there till like 5 p.m., 9 to 5, that's normal. This morning, they started at like 6, which I'm not used to. So, I don't know if you guys know, but I did a live stream on my other channel last night where I played like online trains with my friends. And so I stayed up pretty late doing that, and I wasn't expecting to be woken up early because of construction. So I'm really tired. Hello, Jedi. Hello, Strasbourg Railfanner. Hello, Jason. Hi, Matthew. What's going on? Happy tea time. Ken, how's it going? Ken says, hi, Alex. When they took the boilers out of the Queen Mary, did they add anything to make up for the loss of weight so the ship would still be stable? Is this part of the reason that the ship can't be moved? They did make up for the weight. Actually, it's kind of cool that you asked that, because I think on Saturday I have a video all about that. But essentially, oh, hold on. I have like a, what do you call it? A water cup I need to use to empty out the water. So as I was saying, they did make up for it. There's something in my pocket. What is that? Tickets? Oh my gosh. I have tickets in my pocket from like, when was this? From 2019. I went to see Aladdin. Oh my god. It was a musical, Aladdin the musical. And I still have the ticket in my pocket. What a find. I'm going to put that back in my pocket. So back to your Queen Mary question. Yeah, so what they did was, after they took out the boilers and all the machinery that they ended up removing, they made up for it by filling the Queen Mary's ballast tanks with all kinds of different types of ballast. So some of the ballast was drilling mud, which is something that they use to ballast old ships that are decommissioned. They also filled some of them with ballasting pellets, which are little metal pellets. And then lastly, in order to adjust the ballast of the ship over time, they left a few of the ballast tanks so that way they could be filled with water. Because normally, if you know or don't know, a lot of ships use water as the ballast to weigh down the ship. And they can adjust that ballast depending on how loaded the ship is. So if the ship is overloaded with passengers, they'll release some of the ballast, rising the ship up so it's not too low in the water. And vice versa, if there's not enough passengers and cargo on the ship, then they can actually add ballast to the ship to lower it to where it should be. So anyway, they left some of the ballast tanks as is, and instead of using seawater to fill them, they used fresh water, since it's less corrosive. And that is how the Queen Mary has been ballasted all this time while it sits in Long Beach. And hold on. And so yeah, so my new video, which I think that particular video is coming out on Saturday, will explain all that. And I don't know if I talk about moving the ship in that video, but that's not necessarily... So the ballasting isn't the problem, necessarily. There has been issues where the gaskets on the ballast tanks have failed in the past, and it offset the level of the ship, but they've since made adjustments and repairs to that as needed. But the reason why they can't move the ship until they fix it is because if something were to happen to the hull, like let's say a tugboat was pushing against the ship to move it, and let's say they didn't realize that a particular hull plate they were pushing on was super corroded, and all of a sudden they pop it open and seawater starts coming in. Well, they need to be able to mitigate that flooding with bilge pumps and with watertight compartments. Unfortunately, in recent decades, the Queen Mary has not had working bilge pumps, and then the existing watertight compartments had holes cut into them years ago to remove the infrastructure we were talking about. So that's why they need to make those repairs. And then once she has those, she should be safe enough that they could actually move her. The reason why you probably already guessed, but the reason why they don't want to move her before making those repairs is because if something like that were to happen, where a whole plate pops open for any reason and the ship starts admitting water in, it could capsize during transport. And what if it capsizes somewhere really important, like the entrance to the Long Beach Harbor or something? So they don't want to risk that. So that's why. Yeah. Let's see. Hey Tyler, how's it going? My day is good. How about yours? Chai tea. Yeah, I actually make myself chai tea every couple of mornings. So yesterday morning I made myself some chai tea. But I don't usually have chai tea with tea time. And the reason why is because I feel like, since this is Cunard stuff, I feel like they would serve like Cunard teas on it, like British teas. So I try to stick with British tea on this stuff. But yeah, occasionally in the mornings I'll make myself some chai tea. I make it from scratch. Like I have all the little ingredients. I have cardamom pods, and I have peppercorns, and I have like cinnamon bark and stuff like that. And then I just put that all together and boil it. I have the little Indian tea that goes into it, and you put the tea in there and you boil all that, and then the cream, and the whole works. So I love making myself chai tea, but the funny thing is I can't drink the chai tea unless I put a lot of sugar in it. I've just discovered that if I leave it with only a little bit of sugar, it just doesn't taste that good. I just like having a ton of sugar in there. So that's why I don't have chai tea every morning, because it is very sugary. So, let's see here. Hi Ryan, how's it going? RMS Teutonic is here. You're only here for a little while, I guess. Mr. Olives, hello Mr. Olives. And Thomas, hello Thomas. So, now we can dump this out. Alright, so today I have the egg sandwiches. Yeah. This time the egg sandwiches have fresh dill in them. It is kind of a cold day today, so I have to be extra careful with the china. Alright, that's good. So 415. Sometimes the lid doesn't want to close unless the the tea thing is right in the center. There we go. Alrighty. I have had a problem with ants in the apartment occasionally. Not like lines of ants like you see carting off, you know, whole pies and stuff, but there's scouts everywhere, all over the apartment, looking for food. And I usually keep my kitchen pretty clean, like I don't leave food out, but it's times like this, like I was preparing the sandwich just minutes ago, and there was like an ant crawling on this towel, and I was like, oh my gosh. So I blew the ant off of the thing. I don't like to kill ants. First of all, you're not supposed to, because if you do, they release like a smell that attracts other ants. But the other reason too is I just have so much respect for ants, you know. This conversation's going somewhere weird. Let's talk about something else. I gotta refresh this chat because I noticed some people are commenting, but I don't see any comments. So let me see here. That's weird. Oh, here we go. Matthew asks, can you get inside the Queen Mary's forepeak? I don't think anybody has since 1967. I imagine if they needed to, they could, but yeah, there's a lot of parts of the ship that have been abandoned and haven't been seen for decades. I remember in 2017, they rediscovered an area of the ship that people had just forgotten about. And it was actually underneath the forecastle deck on the bow of the ship, so it was just the level beneath it. And in there was the forward capstan gear room, which ran all the capstans for the bow of the ship and stuff. And it had been sealed off when the ship came to Long Beach because as a hotel they didn't need it. And back then the conventional thinking was that people aren't interested in seeing this machinery. They're here for the architecture of the ship. So it was sealed off, and even part of those rooms were turned into public restrooms. And those public restrooms have since been abandoned as well. So today, that whole area right underneath the forecastle deck is entirely abandoned. And they rediscovered it in 2017 when they went in there to try to repair the bathrooms. I guess one of the plumbers had carved open the wall to see where the plumbing was. When he opened up the wall, he realized there was a whole other room beyond, and it had all the capstan machinery in there. So back then they were advertising, they're like, oh, we're gonna create this as part of our engineering tour. And I thought that was a good idea, you know, like the ship's spaces should be exploited for tours, you know. It's like, that's a great way to make money for the ship. But then they never did it. I guess they just didn't want to spend a single dollar trying to make that room walkable, you know? Really strange. RMS Titanic, how are you doing? Oh, I thought you were Teutonic. Oh, Teutonic is... right. Oh, there's a Teutonic and a Titanic here, so... Fox Starline, how's it going? Matthew, how are you doing? Deck games were created on the Great Eastern because her decks were as wide and long as boulevards. I believe that, yeah. It was a huge ship. For so long, it was like it had the records for the biggest of everything. And it took years for them to catch up and build ships that could beat those different records for size that the Great Eastern had. Amazing. Mark says, that will be a great video, Alex. Looking forward to it. Good morning, by the way. I see McVitie's again. Yum. Yeah, I haven't had very much food today, so I put one more McVitie's on there because I was like, I'm gonna be a bit hungry. It's tea time. Ow. Ow. God, that is so hot. It's just becoming a tradition for me to burn my fingers on the lid of that teapot. I bet you guys just laugh every time. Okay. Now to pour the tea. Well, that was interesting. So when I poured the tea, a little bit spilled out onto the saucer. And after I finished pouring the tea, I heard this like sound of like water gurgling, like just little tiny gurgling bubbles. And I thought, oh no, it's cracked, you know, like, and I look and it's not cracked, but what had happened was the cup, I think, was expanding from the heat. And the tea that I first spilled onto the saucer was trying to get underneath the cup. That was funny. Science. All right. Yeah, I almost freaked out there because I take such good care of this set. I doubt that I'll crack it, you know. It's... I'm so cautious. Probably even a little overly cautious. But it's always good to have more caution than not enough. The tea is ready. Oh, that's delicious. Today it's English breakfast tea. Alright. Let's see. Tyler says, about Saturday, if I had any of your videos on Saturday, or if I watch any of your videos on Saturday, it will have to be during and in between sessions of general conference. Oh, okay. Oh, Evan, no, the Queen Mary's not being moved. I was only talking with Ken about that because he was wondering if the lack of boilers and machinery was part of the reason why it can't be moved at the moment. Yeah, Ken, it was, yeah, I'm glad that they did plan ahead to reballast the Queen Mary. And even right now, they have a plan in place where they want to, one by one, empty those ballast tanks to inspect them, because they haven't been inspected in 55 years. So no one really knows what the condition inside those ballast tanks are. I know that a couple years back, maybe in 2019, the last leasee, Urban Commons, had opened up one or two of the ballast tanks to inspect them and stuff like that. And from the ones that they found, there wasn't much issues. There wasn't much corrosion or anything. They were pretty good compared to their age. I mean, granted, they don't look brand new, but I mean, they weren't bad. They weren't in bad condition. But again, those were just a few ballast tanks. But I know that the city wants to open a few of them up, remove the ballast to inspect the tank and see if there's anything that needs to be done. Anything that does need to be done will have to be done when the ship goes in for a dry docking, whenever that is. It may be a few years before they even complete a dry dock large enough for the Queen Mary. Because I know the city wants to build one, so... Mark says, did you know aboard QE, at least, the tea is a special Cunard blend that you can buy in the gift shops on board? Yeah, I did know that. They've had a Cunard blend for decades. And I think when I do take my trip on the Queen Mary too, I'll try to buy the Cunard blend. Yeah, the egg sandwiches are good. I'm only eating them because I'm out of cucumber. I buy so much cucumber and then it doesn't last even in the fridge, so they just get all soggy and gross very quickly. So I have to like eat them as often as possible. So Matthew says, remind me what leaves you put in the spread of the cucumber sandwiches. I put dill weed, fresh dill. So yeah, so I chop up some fresh dill, mince it pretty much, and then that goes into the cucumber. I have dill in the egg sandwiches right now. Traditionally, the egg sandwiches, though, are not made with dill. They're made with watercress, but I don't have access to watercress. So RMS Teutonic says, here in Australia, it's just starting to get the kind of weather where we wear hoodies at night. Oh, yeah, I heard you guys are having like a monsoon season or something, or... let's see. Matthew says, it's a beautiful setup, the tea set, and good to know about the ballast tanks. I've read they were filled with goop once in Long Beach, so she could not sail again. I'm sure I'm getting something mixed up. Only a little mixed up. So they didn't fill it with like goop. Some of the ballast tanks were filled with drilling mud. It's a special kind of grout that is basically just sand. So they filled some of the tanks with drilling mud. Other tanks were filled with metal ballasting pellets. So they're metal pellets designed to weigh down ships that are no longer in service. And then lastly, they left a few ballast tanks as is. Those ballast tanks were designed to hold seawater. So they left a few of the seawater ballast tanks as is, holding currently fresh water. So that way, in case if for some reason, let's just say for some reason, I don't know, Lady Gaga boards the Queen Mary, and next thing you know, like 500,000 people decide they're going to go follow her onto the ship. If the ship fills up with people, then theoretically it would start lowering very deep into the water, and in order to offset the ship just lowering, they could empty some of the ballast tanks as the people board the ship to raise it up a little bit. And same thing when, that many people leave the ship will suddenly start rising up, and it would rise up too high, so they can fill the ballast tanks to lower it a bit further. So that's why they left some of them with fresh water in them. But as far as I know, they have never... Oh, no. As far as I know, only once have they needed to adjust the ballast tanks since the Queen Mary's been in Long Beach. And that was because one of the ballast tanks' gaskets failed at one point, a long time ago. And the ship started listing to starboard side. And they had to correct that. So... let's see here. Lopez Design says, hey Alex, hope you're having a great afternoon. Looking forward to today's chat. I'd love to have tea time with you next time you come to California. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know when the next time will be. I know it's been 2 years. It's kind of sad. I have a lot of family in California that I really miss, and I haven't seen them in 2 years. Matthew says, also, all the old gutted refrigeration spaces below deck that could be reutilized and made way for revitalizing areas like the second-class restaurant. Yeah. Well, the refrigeration spaces are completely gone. Like, there's no level there anymore. Because they ended up removing part of D deck to make a higher ceiling space for the museum lobby. Museum lobby is on E deck. So they wanted like a 2-story lobby. So they just got rid of part of D deck to make it happen. But that's also why that's also why the second class restaurant is now being used as refrigeration space. So sad. It's like pretty much anybody who's had control of the ship has no idea what to do with it. Like, it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me that all those companies had so much trouble, because literally all you have to do is go to the nearest successful business to scout what they're doing and copy it. I mean, you could easily go to a nearby 5-star resort and see what they're doing to make their guests comfortable, and then go to Disneyland and see what they do to entertain people without the use of rides and stuff like that. And then you go, I can take some of these ideas and then formulate them in such a way that they fit the Queen Mary. It's as simple as that. Businesses do that kind of thing all the time. They look at what the competitors are doing, and then they try to find a way to fit that into their business. But the thing is like you look at, the more I learn about the previous leaseholders of the ship, and I look into how they handled things, it was obvious that nobody did their homework. They just tossed around ideas to the point where they were like, all right, let's see if that sticks. And then when it doesn't, they lose tons of money. And I know that would surprise a lot of people. Like, they'd be like, oh, come on, there had to be some better planning than that. And I have to tell you, honestly, I'm not even lying, you guys. When I look at the information of all these different companies, even the Disney company, when they owned the Queen Mary at one point, well, not owned the lease to the Queen Mary at one point, they sent their, I want to be careful how I say it, but because I don't mean offense, but basically they sent some of their least experienced people to operate the ship. You know, they had a lot of stuff. Disney had a lot of theme parks and resorts that were opening around the time that they got a hold of the Queen Mary. And so they had all their best minds, all their most creative people working on those projects. And meanwhile, they had the less tenured / less experienced people working on the Queen Mary. And those were the people who were like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Ghosts! That's the answer. Ghosts! And, you know, and it's like I always complain about. Disney was going, why aren't families visiting? But it's as easy as looking at their brochure. The brochure had a picture of a ghost dragging a child down the hallway. Yeah, families aren't going to visit a place like that. You know, like, it should be obvious. It should be so obvious. But everybody who's operated the Queen Mary, aside from the early years of the Ratherport Corporation, everybody else has just not known what to do with it. At least Jack Rather, when he had it, he knew. You know? He knew. So, after he died, his company was just kind of like, don't really care. But, yeah. RMS Queen Mary says, can people go on the Queen Mary's crow's nest? No, nobody can. Even if they could, they would probably fall right through the floor of the crow's nest. It's that corroded. Conrad says, Alex, Queen Mary is not allowed by contract to ever sail again, no matter how much money someone might want to spend on her, correct? That is correct. She is under contract that anybody who purchases her adopts the rule that she is not to sail again. And that's because Cunard does not want their former flagship competing against them. So, let's see. Evan Scott says Queen Mary's cargo room should be open for tourism. Currently, what's in the cargo holds of the Queen Mary is their archives. I say that with air quotes because it's not a true archive. They don't take careful care of the objects that are in there. They don't have like air conditioning and stuff, and they don't have people constantly monitoring the objects to make sure that that the acidity in the air isn't destroying them. But that is where they keep a lot of the Queen Mary's historical stuff, is in the cargo holds. So actually, there are still a lot of furniture, some of it dating back to the 1930s, lots of old-fashioned signage and decorations, hardware that used to be on the ship. A lot of the stuff that has been removed from the guest rooms over the years, a lot of it, and I don't mean most of it, but just a lot of it, has been saved and put inside the cargo holds. So the cargo holds is level by level by level of old vintage Queen Mary stuff. So technically, if someone with a lot of imagination and a lot of money went into the Queen Mary to refurbish the ship, they could bring a lot of those old artifacts out of the archives, refresh them, and place them back on the ship. There's even old light fixtures from second and third class, and some even from first class, that were just taken off the ceilings and stored in the cargo holds. And those date back to the 1930s. So they could easily replace all the newer lighting fixtures with stuff from the 1930s. But I mean, I'm thankful that at least they do have those things. But it is a shame that those were even removed in the first place and replaced with modern light fixtures and other various hardware. But at least if someone did have the money, they could go into the cargo holds and reuse a lot of those items, especially the furniture. Matthew says, I've always wanted to go up to the Crow's Nest. Used to be a museum on B deck where they had a mirror looking up to the top of the Crow's Nest. That was cool. That does sound cool, actually. I didn't know that. Museum on B deck. I think I might know where that is. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, before they built that illusionist's room where he stays, that was a museum. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Matthew asks, how much of the Queen Mary can be restored? That really depends on how much you want to spend and how much you want to reuse that is old. So, I mean, that's a very complex question, because technically 100% of it could be restored if you really wanted to. But I think that you have a very specific question in mind. Oh, Teutonic has to leave. Okay, I'll see you later. Year 1 says, Alex, were you for or against Queen Mary's Dark Harbor? It's complex. I'm not for it or against it. But what I feel about it is Dark Harbor should not take place aboard the ship. They should keep all the Dark Harbor stuff on the harbor, on the pier. The reason why is because a lot of the Dark Harbor stuff that they have set up on the ship has damaged the ship and is also currently hindering people's abilities to tour other areas of the ship. So that's my little deal with Dark Harbor is I'm not against it. I think celebrating Halloween with scary stuff is a good idea, but it shouldn't take place on the ship just due to the fact that they've damaged the ship for years thanks to Dark Harbor. Dark Harbor has been responsible for physical damage to the ship, to the plumbing, to the electrical, to even when they tack up all the decorations on the walls and stuff. And Dark Harbor was a major factor in the reason why the first class swimming pool is in such terrible shape. That whole pool room was severely damaged by special effects added for Dark Harbor. So we can thank Dark Harbor for us not being able to see the first class swimming pool room. It just looks so terrible that they don't want to open it to people because it looks terrible. It would make people question why no one's taking care of it. So yeah, that's my deal with Dark Harbor. Matthew says, have you ever had Irish breakfast tea? Only had it once, but I want it again. Yeah, actually, I rotate between English breakfast tea, Irish breakfast tea, and Earl Grey. So, last time I did my live stream, I had Irish breakfast tea. Let's see here. Oh, I see, Tyler. Okay. It's a conference. The Cunard asks, the city is planning to build a dry dock? Actually, yeah. They haven't officially announced it yet because they're still investigating how they would go about it and where it would go. But yes, they are currently in the investigative stages of building a dry dock. So they recognize that, you see, the city really, really, really wants to refurbish the Queen Mary to the degree that it'll last for 100 years. They did a feasibility study on the ship's finances. They said, is the ship worth repairing? Will it make enough money back to make it worth repairing? And so they had a third party actually do I forget what they call it, but it was like a survey. They surveyed the feasibility of the ship's success. And even after 55 years, it still has great potential for major success if people run it correctly. So that's when the city decided, okay, we want to go through with refurbishing the ship so it'll last 100 years. But part of the 100-year refurbishment plan included dry docking the ship, because a ship like the Queen Mary that is retired needs to have its hull cleaned and repainted around every 5 to 10 years. Well, the Queen Mary has not had a dry docking since she came to Long Beach 55 years ago. They know that they have to build one, and frankly, they want to build a dry dock because there are very few dry docks in the United States compared to other parts of the world. And they know that dry docks make a lot of money because you can put cruise ships in there, you can put military ships in there, and you can put cargo ships in there for doing refurbishment projects. It makes a lot of money to have a dry dock. So they are in the process of investigating what it will take to construct one. They know roundabout how much the price will be. I think it was about $200 million to construct a massive dry dock large enough for the Queen Mary and other ships of her size or larger. And they're currently seeing how they can go about doing it. So I'm actually really happy to hear that. But again, it's not official yet because they haven't announced, all right, we're going through with it. They're just investigating it at the moment. But yeah. And when they have it built, the Queen Mary should be, by then the Queen Mary should be fixed up enough that she should be safe for towing it to the dry dock. And the Queen Mary is surrounded in what's called a breakwater. So it's a pile of rocks that form an underwater fence around the ship, and that helps literally break the waves of water that might, on occasion, try to hit the Queen Mary, including wakes from large ships or boats, including small tsunamis that might hit the California coast, and also preventing other vessels from crashing into the Queen Mary by accident. So that's what the breakwater does. They brought the Queen Mary in. They basically made like two different sides of the breakwater, and they floated the Queen Mary in from behind, and by pushing her with tugboats, and then they sealed up the third wall of the breakwater behind her. And so if they want to tow her out, they will have to remove that third wall again and do the reverse operation, push her out with tugboats, and she can be floated a couple miles away to a different dry dock. So that's how it would happen. Let's see. Yeah, Matthew Richards says, truly there was so many examples of successful comparisons. Hotel del Coronado, SS Rotterdam, Disneyland, huge historic mansions in England and France turned into hotels and homes they revitalized. Oh yeah, there are lots of historic hotels and ships all around the world that are successful, and they do things that the whole idea that the previous operators of the Queen Mary have missed all these years is you're supposed to design the amenities of your ship to make money on the ship. And people can tell you, if you visit the Queen Mary in the past, well, not if you have visited the Queen Mary in the past, you will notice that, or you would have noticed that, why am I talking in present tense? You would have noticed that she was full of advertisements for local attractions and very few attractions on the Queen Mary. And as recent years ticked on, more and more advertisements for attractions outside the ship were being advertised on the ship. And that's a bad business model, because with a ship as large and as big as the Queen Mary, you can't rely on other attractions to make you successful. She's not an airport hotel. She's not a place you go because you have to. She should be a place you go because you want to. So they should have been designing new experiences and attractions around the guest's experience and force them to stay on the ship. When me and my friends went to visit the Queen Mary, the Queen Mary had 3 or 4 different restaurants, right? Only one of them was open that weekend. Only one of them was open. And so we did have brunch on the ship, and we would have stayed for dinner if there was another restaurant open. We would have stayed for dinner. But there wasn't, so we left. And that's a bad business model, because you want people to spend their money on the ship, not outside of it. If people want to go to the Aquarium of the Pacific, okay, maybe you can't offer what the Aquarium of the Pacific has. So, okay, that's a good idea. But, when it comes to spas, restaurants, attractions and experiences, and shopping and dining, or shopping, I should say, those 5 things you should try to provide on the ship. And they had very little of any of those things. So it was just a bad business model, And so, yeah. They had a large assortment of tours, I'll tell you that much, but those tours were expensive. I was like, okay, I will fill my day with tours, But obviously, I can't take them all. It's expensive. So I was like, they really should attempt to slim down the menu of tours. Because tours are a good thing. You make a lot of money on tours, but there should be a way to get most of your information without having to go on 5 or 6 different tours. So, yeah. Crittenden asks, do you think the RMS Olympic could have competed? Competed against what? For the blue ribbon? Not for the blue ribbon. She wasn't fast enough. RMS Queen Mary asks, what was the first cruise ship? Oh, the first purpose-built cruise ship. Oh, I forget its name, but it was built in 1901, I believe. And it was like a yacht. It looked a lot like a yacht. And it was the first purpose-built cruise ship. I forget the name. But it was built in like 1900, 1901, something like that. Matthew Mahoney says, I would restore all the passenger areas. I would restore examples of the passenger areas. Like, I wouldn't waste the money to restore all of the third class rooms. And the reason why is because no one's going to use them. So you'd be spending a whole lot of money on something that people probably aren't going to see. Like, the third class rooms that were on, back then it was called D deck. I think today, maybe C. Yeah, back then it was called D deck. Today it's known as C deck. But essentially, the 1936 D deck had a lot of third class cabins. It was like a maze down there, like a maze. And I think that if you tried to restore all of them, it would be pointless, because since it is a maze, people would not want to get lost down there. It's the same reason, like when I'm on Titanic Honor and Glory on my live streams and stuff, there does get to be a point when you go through the third class areas, they all look the same. So I know that the average tourist on Queen Mary would probably go down a couple of those third class hallways and then go, it all looks the same, let's turn back. And you'd just be wasting money. So I would restore a section of third class rooms, like a single hallway with a couple of offshoots. I might restore that many, but not all of them. It's not worth it. But even then, room B340, the room on the ship that is famous for being the most haunted room on the ship, used to be third class rooms. I think 4 or 5 of them. I would just bulldoze B340 and then reconstruct the third class rooms that were there. And that alone is enough of an example where you can show different kinds of third class staterooms. And there used to be a public restroom on that corner for the passengers. So you could recreate the public restroom. And that should be enough to satisfy the need to see what the third class spaces were like. But nevertheless, if you wanted to go a step further, you could restore a section of third class rooms, but I wouldn't restore all of them. But there are other places that should be restored. The second class dining room, second class library, second class cocktail bar, all that stuff should be restored. I'd love to see the first class starboard and port side long galleries restored. And the Queen Mary's original 1936 ballroom. The 1936 ballroom, if that existed today, you could use that for people to get married in. Because the Queen Mary currently has a chapel, right? Some of you may know of it. The chapel on the Queen Mary is, or it used to be, the second class Smoking room. That's right. The place on the ship where God lives, the chapel, used to be a smoking room. I bet he likes that. But point is, I would like to see the second-class smoking room restored. So if you're going to remove the chapel to restore the smoking room, where do people have their weddings? Well, reconstruct the 1936 ballroom that was nearby, the first-class ballroom, and the coloration of that ballroom was already tones of silver and platinum. So those are perfect colors for getting married in, because those are gray colors. People can use middle ground tones such as gray to decorate the room any way they want, because it works, it fits, you know. So so the ballroom is perfect for hosting weddings. The chapel is not even original to the ship. It was added when the ship came to Long Beach. So it doesn't even look right, you know. Yeah. Mark Cooper says, I agree with you about Dark Harbor. By coincidence, I stayed aboard the Queen Mary during Dark Harbor. As a guest, it was very uncomfortable. Noise all through the night, lots of screaming. Oh, yeah. I can imagine. It must be terrible. Matthew says, I wonder how much it would cost to put in the pre-war lime sherbet linoleum with soundproofing underneath. In places, post-war linoleum is in bad shape. I'm sure plans are in the Liverpool archives. I bet they are, too. But yes, I would. So I assume you're talking about the area where Piccadilly Circus / the main hall is. I agree. I want them to restore that linoleum. And this is my next thing I'm about to say is probably a bit more controversial, but the main hall, or Piccadilly Circus, on Promenade Deck is covered in hide. There's hide panels all over, which was added after World War II to make the room look a bit more modern. And I don't like them. I don't like the hide panels. I thought the room looked even more beautiful before with all of its wall paneling, the wood wall paneling. I believe it was chestnut wall paneling. And I thought, if I had millions of dollars, I would remove all the additions they put in after the war and restore it to the way it looked in 1936 as it was intended to look, including the linoleum floors and the chestnut wall paneling. So, side note, since we're talking about wall paneling. The other day, I finished writing the script for my Benson Hotel video. And I also voiced over the narration of it. So through this weekend, I'm going to be working on that video and release that. And then after the Benson Hotel, there'll be a bunch of other videos where I'm talking in front of a camera to, and as those videos come out, I'll be working on the H4 Hercules / Spruce Goose video. But, yeah. So I would say look out this coming Tuesday for the Benson Hotel video. And that video, I'm worried not a lot of people are going to watch it. But the reason why I'm telling you guys is because it's going to be a really good video. It's very interesting. And but I do know there is a general thing that happens on my channel where if I cover a topic that isn't covered very much, pretty much nobody watches it. So I'm letting you guys know ahead of time that you'll like it if you watch it. It's got a very heartwarming story to it. and there's lots to see. I took tons of video at the Benson Hotel, in the lobby at least, and the lobby is this beautiful Edwardian lobby, and so there's a whole story that I wrote around the history of it and who built it. It'll be great. It'll be really great. So just a little side note for you guys. Let's see. RMS Queen Mary says, was Queen Mary always a Bunker C oil burner? Yeah. Yeah. Ever since day one, she burned Bunker C oil. Matthew Richards says, watched Adam the Woo's Dark Harbor 2019 or 18. Cassember was using original Cunard bread plate as a prop, eating off of it. And that made you upset. They could have used any other plate. I agree that I don't think that this luncheon plate is pretty close to what the bread plate looked like. So wow, a Dark Harbor Cassember was eating off of an original Cunard bread plate. Wow. Now, that might seem like I'm a bit contradicting myself, but the difference here is that from what it sounds like, that plate was still on the ship. It was a ship artifact. As long as it's on the ship, it's considered a ship's artifact. This is now my personal property. And if I thought that Queen Mary would take care of all this stuff, I'd donate it to them in a heartbeat. If they said, Alex, here is a guarantee that we will not sell this stuff off to everybody and that we will take the best care of it possible. It will go in an exhibit that will be guarded by security. I'd say, okay, you can have all this stuff for free. I would give it all back to the Queen Mary in a heartbeat. This to me isn't treasure. I don't keep it because I because I want status or anything. I'd give it all back in a heartbeat. The reason why I collected it was because I had a feeling that people who own this stuff are not taking care of it. And I know that I can. So, as I drop the teapot lid every time I burn myself. But, yeah, so anyway, back to my original point was that if that Cassember was eating off of a ship's artifact that belonged to the ship, that shouldn't be right. Ugh, geez, that's terrible. I'm not mad at the Cassember. They probably didn't know the importance of what they were doing, but I am mad at whoever is in charge of keeping track of those artifacts. I'm mad that whoever was responsible for that wasn't doing their job. That's what I'm mad at. So, Matthew says, can you find Irish English breakfast tea at a local supermarket such as Walmart? You can, but I mean, you might be able to find sorry, my nose is getting stuffy. You might be able to find Twinings, but I don't know for certain. But I'll tell you one thing. Most Americans who are going to Walmart for tea are not buying Twinings. They're there to buy, like, Lipton's tea. So, yeah. Everybody's like, preach it, Alex. I forgot at one point what I was talking about. Little Gamer says, if I owned RMS Queen Mary, I would make it feel like you're boarding a real ocean liner from the 1930s. I would too. I would restore the ship to the way it looked in the 1930s, with authentic materials, at least as many as I can find. And the ship would look beautiful once again. Did you know that the wall paneling you see all over the ship is slightly darker than it was in 1936? And that's because all the varnish that protects that wall paneling has darkened. Varnish, in case you don't know, darkens over time. So the ship's wall panels used to be more golden colored than they are today. Beautiful color. But they're all faded. They all need to be revarnished. That's one of the things that needs to happen aboard the ship eventually, after they do all the important stuff, is they need to sand down all of the wall paneling and revarnish it back to the color or stain it and then revarnish it to the color it originally was, so it can go another 55 years, before it needs to be revarnished again. Heck, there's varnishes right now that are designed not to fade with time. So, they could do that. Matthew Mahoney says, what about a floating dry dock? That wouldn't work for the Queen Mary. So part of the reason is because they looked into it. They thought about using a floating dry dock, but the floating dry dock would not be able to enter Long Beach Harbor. The harbor's too shallow. It would have to stay out at sea. Now, the Queen Mary, she's safe as long as she's in Long Beach Harbor, but there's no guarantee what will happen when she goes out to sea. So towing her out to sea would be a huge risk. And then the other thing, too, is that there might be a worry as to the kind of weather and stuff that might happen while the Queen Mary is on that dry dock. But as long as she's in the harbor, she's safe. So a floating dry dock wouldn't work. But they did look into it. They investigated to see if they could do it, and it just turned out it just wouldn't work. It was not safe for the Queen Mary. Matthew Richards says, I never got to eat at the high tea themed restaurant forward of the sun deck before it shut down. It was really cultural. They didn't market it enough or direct people to it enough on board. Oh, yeah, I know. I remember asking my friend Shiloh. I said, what was in that space on sun deck all the way forward? And he goes, oh, that was a tea place. I'm like, a tea place? And he was like, yeah, it was a tea shop. You go there and you get your afternoon tea and all that. And I'm like, I've been looking at like deck plans and brochures and stuff, and I'm like, I don't see that anywhere. And he was like, yeah, it just never, no one ever really advertised it much. And yeah, I have to agree with you that it's a good idea, but they didn't advertise it enough. Americans love sweets. They love stuff like that. If you just tell them that it's not just tea, it's also coffee and sweets, they go, So it's like, Americans are not against eating this food. They just need someone to speak their language. They need someone to say, hey, you like chocolate? You can get chocolate over there. Or, or hey, you like sandwiches? You can get sandwiches over there. You like tea? You like coffee? You can get that over there. You got to speak to Americans like an American. You can't just be like, would you like high tea? They'd be like, no. So that's the difference. So, let's see. Little Gamer says, I was in the aquarium of the Pacific, and there is a cockatoo and many birds. Oh, yeah. Oh, they have amazing animals at the aquarium of the Pacific. That was one of my favorite places to go as a kid. In fact, I would still go. If I had the chance to go there, I'd go. It's a fun place. That's right. Prinzessin Victoria Louise. That's the name of the first cruise ship. Was I right? Was it 1901 or was it 1900? I'm curious now. Goofy Roll says, it's just wrong to force Long Beach residents to pay for a vanity project like the Queen Mary. Those taxes are better spent on people, not the government's pet projects. You are right. But the thing is that the Queen Mary is not being funded by taxpayer money. The only time she's ever been paid for by taxpayer money was actually 2021. They took $2.5 million from taxpayer funds in order to pay for security of the ship. And I'd almost argue that's actually in the best interests of people, because if the ship was suddenly to catch fire or something and it damages the environment, I bet most people would wish the city would have just used the taxpayer money to protect the ship. So that's what it was used for. It was used to protect the ship, and keep security there and keep custodial services there. But other than that, the other millions of dollars all these years has not been taxpayer money. The ship has several sources of funding that are not on the ship. So it receives about $2.4 million a year from the Carnival Cruise Terminal. The cruise terminal, everybody who purchases a ticket to board a cruise ship at that terminal, they pay a small fee. That fee tallies up over time, and annually they give $2.4 million to the Queen Mary. And then the people who pay for parking, the exorbitant, overly expensive parking the Queen Mary has, $18. That money goes towards the Queen Mary. And I believe even the parking fee for the cruise terminal also goes towards the Queen Mary. And then the Catalina Island Express and the Long Beach Water Taxi, they both have a dock that is using the land the Queen Mary sits on. They pay their fees to the Queen Mary. And then, when the Queen Mary desperately needs a large sum of money, like recently, they use the Tidelands Fund. The Tidelands Fund is meant for harbor projects in the state of California. So any infrastructure that is located in the various harbors or tidelands of California that needs money, those cities and areas can request money from the Tidelands Fund. The Tidelands Fund is partially funded by California's various oil fracking. Even Long Beach contributes to the Tideland Fund with all the oil fracking they do. So it's fees generated from the oil fracking that they do. So the Tidelands Fund is not taxpayer money. So that's at least a good thing. So I know that the reason why I went into such detail explaining it is because actually a lot of people believe that the Queen Mary is constantly being funded by taxpayer money, but it's just not. It's not. It's got its own revenue sources. And then I think the Port Authority, they want to expand the cruise terminal to hold at least 2 cruise ships, if not 4, which will either double or quadruple the annual income that goes towards the Queen Mary. So it could either be nearly $5 million a year or $10 million a year that goes towards funding the Queen Mary. That would be a huge thing if they were able to quadruple the capacity of the cruise terminal. Little Gamer says, life cycle of a room on the Queen Mary. Smoking room to chapel. Yeah. Oh, Crittenden says that they were wondering if the Olympic would compete as a running mate to the Queen Mary. I mean, if they had needed the Olympic long enough, I guess, but the whole reason why they got rid of Mauretania and Olympic is because Queen Mary was coming online. If the Queen Mary had never been built, Olympic and Mauretania probably would have stuck around for a couple more years until they did have something. But I don't think it would have ever been destined. Not in a million years. Only because, again, the Queen Mary was meant as their replacement. Matthew Mahoney says, does the Queen Mary have asbestos? Yes. So I'm not going to lie about that. The Queen Mary is full of asbestos. I'm not even joking. I don't want to frighten you guys, because I will explain why I'm so confident and not freaking out. But yes, the Queen Mary is practically made of asbestos. That's how much asbestos she has. But here's the good thing. First of all, asbestos is not dangerous to you if it's not disturbed. So if you leave it where it is, it poses no safety hazards. You have to disturb asbestos in order for it to become airborne and affect you. It cannot, it's an impossibility for asbestos that is not disturbed to somehow negatively affect your health. It's almost the same thing as dust, because asbestos can become a dust in the air. So if you picture dust on objects or whatever, not that this is dusty, but you have objects and it has dust on it. If you leave the dust where it is, it doesn't get into your nose. But if you disturb the dust and it becomes airborne, it gets into your nose and you sneeze. Or you cough. So the same thing with asbestos. If you don't disturb it, it's fine. And the asbestos in the Queen Mary is sealed up into the various objects on the ship. So for instance, you might have heard in several of my videos that the various hardwares on the ship, the handrails, the handles to doorknobs, drawers, cabinets, sometimes even objects like the old-fashioned cigarette holders, the ashtrays, things like that. A lot of the hardware on the ship is made of Bakelite, and you've probably heard me talk about Bakelite before. Even the Bakelite buttons in the lounges that call the stewards over. Bakelite contains asbestos. That's one of the reasons why we don't make stuff out of Bakelite today. Because one of the things that made Bakelite such a miraculous material was that it didn't melt when you put hot stuff near it, like really hot stuff. It didn't melt because it was made with asbestos, and asbestos is a good insulator. So the Bakelite objects on the ship contain asbestos. But the good news is that you can't disturb the asbestos in the Bakelite because it's sealed into the plastic, so it can't release. Not unless you break the Bakelite. But even then, it would be really difficult to break the Bakelite and have, tons of particles of asbestos get released. It's just not possible. It's just sealed in there. It's almost like baking sugar into a cake. You can't separate the sugar from the cake. So it's the same thing with Bakelite. But other ways that there's asbestos in the ship is that... sorry, my nose keeps wanting to get stuffy as I talk. But the wooden wall panelings on the ship, those are designed to be somewhat fire retardant. So basically, the way that the wall panels are made is they start off, they're 4 layers thick. The first 3 layers is a layer of very cheap plywood, very thin, cheap plywood. In between is a layer of asbestos woven as a sheet. Okay, so it's a sheet of woven asbestos, and then they put another piece of cheap plywood to sandwich the asbestos together. And then on the outside of that, they put the really expensive wood veneer, the exotic veneers that go on it. And that's how the wall panels for the ship are made. So the wall panels contain asbestos. Now, the asbestos is fire retardant. It doesn't catch fire. The wood does, but the idea was that the wood paneling on the Queen Mary, if it caught fire, it would take a long time to burn. It would be difficult for the fire to spread quickly because of the asbestos in between the layers. Now, those wall panels are harmless unless you cut through them. If you cut through those wall panels like a plumber might to replace a pipe, which probably some of the pipes might contain lead, but I'm pretty sure the lead pipes are no longer used. They use copper pipes instead. They never removed the lead pipes. They just added copper pipes around it. But yeah. So what was I saying? Oh yeah. So unless you cut through the wooden wall paneling, you can't disturb the asbestos in the walls. The Queen Mary's carpeting, the stuff when it did have carpets, used to be asbestos, but those carpets have been removed since 55 years ago. There's no asbestos carpets left on the Queen Mary. No, let me correct that. In the archives, there are asbestos carpets. In the archives. But they don't use them. They're just being stored because they're antique carpets. So let's see, Bakelite wall panels. There is very little sound insulation on the ship, but wherever they did have sound insulation, they would have been made with asbestos. Oh, and then when you go to engineering spaces that have steam or hot pipes, those pipes were covered in a insulation layer made of asbestos. So when you go through the engine room and you see the pipes covered in like a white sheet, it probably looks like plaster casts that you might put on your arm if you break your arm. Those sheets are not plaster, they're asbestos. Again, they're not dangerous if you don't disturb them. And they haven't been disturbed for all the decades they've been there. So they're not hazardous to you. But yes, so yeah, back to my conclusion. There is a lot of asbestos on the Queen Mary. But it's not dangerous if you don't disturb it. So let's see. RMS Queen Mary says, do you know what happened to the tender SS Traffic? If I remember correctly, the SS Traffic was scrapped because they if I remember correctly, the Pneumatic and the Traffic, they no longer needed the Traffic at one point, so they just kept Pneumatic. The Traffic was scrapped, and the Pneumatic remained. So I believe that's how it happened. Matthew Richards says, the second first-class dining room light has been taken apart. Part of it is in Piccadilly Circus. I know what you're talking about. Mostly intact. The top part is rusting away deep below. How did this happen? I don't know. Okay, I know. So what Matthew Richards is talking about is the uplights. There were two of them in the first class main restaurant of the Queen Mary. And they were basically... How do I describe them? They're about yay big, maybe this long, about a little bit taller than I am, so probably closer to 7 feet or little over 2 meters tall. And they were designed almost as standing lamps, right? They're wide, but they're thin, and they have a sheet of glass that is like carved, and it looks beautiful in between the pillars. And they just kind of stood there. And they provided light in the center of the room, since most of the lights were, since the best lighting was closer to the sides of the room. So they had two of those uplights in the center. Anyway, the point is, they removed them, both of them, from the first class main dining room when the Queen Mary came to Long Beach. I guess they just got in the way of being in the center of the first class dining room. I don't know. But they put one in Piccadilly Circus up on Promenade Deck, and it's still there today. The other one is currently in the archives, and they've actually taken pieces off of the one in archives to repair the one on Piccadilly Circus after all these years. So there's probably very little originality left to the one in the archives, and the one on Piccadilly Circus is the only reason why it's in such good shape is because they've been taking parts from the other one. But as to why it's rusting on the bottom, the reason is because they used to hold live plants on, like, closer to the midsection of the uplights. They had little planter boxes, and those had live plants, and they would water the plants, and the water would drip down, and over time it just rusted the thing away. I think today, I don't have a picture of it right here, but if I'm picturing it in my head, I believe today they use fake plants on it. But back then they would have been live plants. So that's why it's rusted on the bottom, is just from years of watering the live plants. RMS Queen Mary says, why don't ships have clipper sterns? We talked about this in the last live stream. At least I think it was you who asked, but clipper sterns went away because of a need to maximize the amount of square footage a ship can have. Also, the way hydrodynamics work on the ocean, it turned out cruiser sterns were just better overall for handling the, I forget what they're called, but the back waves that come up against the ship. The cruiser sterns handle that kind of thing better. So that's why. Yeah, I agree, Mark, about Queen Mary being recreated 1930s style. Goofy Roll says, at best, these organizations that pay for the Queen Mary are a front for the politicians, so they can claim they are not spending our money on a rusting derrick in the harbor. I know the Long Beach government, they are very corrupt and probably have many backroom deals. Look at NASA, civilian space program, did it much better. You know, Goofy Rolls, you do have a certain point that you are right. There has been a lot of crookedness around the Queen Mary. People have been applying for money for the ship, and that money, we don't know where it goes. There's no way to document it, or there's no way to look it up because they don't document it. So there's been a lot of questionable things that make you wonder. And yeah, you're totally right about that part. But there hasn't been much taxpayer money spent on the ship. Again, really the only time was in 2021 when they desperately needed that $2.5 million of taxpayer money to safeguard the ship for the next 2 years, just to pay the security guards and pay the custodians and make sure that there's no fires happening on the ship, you know, that kind of thing. But that's the fee that the company, what was it called? Evolution Hospitality said. They said, give us $2.5 million, you've got a contract. So that's what happened. But aside from that, there hasn't been any taxpayer money going on the ship. It's all been just from fees and things that are generated towards the ship, but not taxes, not people's hard-earned money, generally. So, but yeah, the other thing too is, like what Matthew Richards is saying, the organizations haven't been paying for the Queen Mary's upkeep at all. If anything, whatever money the Queen Mary has made, they just pocket it. They just pocket it. They don't put it back into the Queen Mary. The only refurbishment projects I've ever seen was the ones that was happening in 2019 and 2020. And those were poorly done. They were really just a front for making it look like the Queen Mary was being taken care of. But it was not as... What am I trying to say? The work that was done was so poor, it was just as bad as the paint job on the ship. The paint job which is currently peeling, which shouldn't be happening. So, Titanic Gaming says, if a ship could beat Queen Mary, what ship would it be? Beat the Queen Mary how? Let's see. Hey Keith, how's it going? Sus says, what are your favorite video games? I like the Disneyland Railroad Simulator. I like the World War II game I'm playing called Enlisted. And I like this other game called Railroads Online. So those are my favorite games. I don't really play anything else, to be honest. That's pretty much it. Yeah, Goofy Rolls says those are all taxes. I don't, unless you're talking to somebody else, but I know the stuff I told you was not taxes. Yeah, I don't, these are... Yeah, I don't know where that conversation's going, but let's see. Matthew Mahoney says, didn't Cunard remove a part of the ballroom in the 1950s before Long Beach did? Yeah, Cunard removed the ballroom in 1947. So when the Queen Mary came back from the war, they decided to get rid of the ballroom that was there. And so Cunard did it, not Long Beach. But nevertheless, it would be nice to see the ballroom again. Off the top of my head, I forget what they replaced the ballroom with in the 1940s. I don't remember. I don't remember what they replaced it with. Tyler says the traffic was sunk by the Nazis. Was it really? I had no idea. Scrapped after it was refloated. Let's see. Matthew Richards says SS United States was faster than Queen Mary, so she could probably beat the Queen Mary in that sense. Yeah. Philip says, have you tried War Thunder, made by the same people that made Enlisted, I believe? I almost did. I downloaded it, never played it though. I still haven't gotten around to it. Some of my friends who have played War Thunder or something like that, they say that Enlisted is better. So I was like, okay, I'll just stick with Enlisted. I like Enlisted a lot, so... but I'm the kind of person where I don't buy different versions of the same type of game. I usually find the game that I consider the best and I stick with it. So I'm not a gamer. That's why. Like, I don't go like, I love shooter games, so I'm going to buy several different types of shooter games. Like, I don't do that. Like, I like Enlisted, and that's probably the only shooter game I'll ever have. So, unless something really cool comes up, but... Sus says, could Mauretania sink like Titanic if both hulls were punctured just enough? Yeah, maybe not. It wouldn't look like Titanic when it sank. A different thing would happen. The ship would probably capsize. But yeah, it would, definitely. In fact, there was so much space in the double hull of Lusitania and Mauretania that it's possible that, by flooding one side of one compartment, it could capsize the ship on that alone. People are trying to tell me, oh, well, Alex, the Queen Mary has a double hull, and if that got punctured, it would just cause the ship to capsize. My answer to that was, not really. The reason why the Queen Mary wouldn't capsize if one of those things was punctured, because each of those tanks was a lot smaller than the spaces on Lusitania, the coal bunkers on Lusitania. So it's not the same amount of volume, and it's not the same dimensions. So on the Queen Mary, for instance, let's just say, Lusitania's what do you call it? If you're looking down at the coal bunkers from top to bottom, Lusitania's coal bunkers probably were more like a rectangle, right? Well, more like a rectangle by looking down at them. On Queen Mary, they're more like a square. They're smaller, so they have less capacity. So if you puncture one or two, it's not the same capacity as puncturing one on Lusitania or Mauretania. And furthermore, the ones on Lusitania and Mauretania, they were something like 3 or 4 meters, so 10 or 14 or 15 feet in depth, to hold the coal. So that's why if they got flooded, it would just be a ton of water weight on one side. But on the Queen Mary, that couldn't happen because the maximum depth of those was 16 feet, but the thing is that the ship was far wider than that. And then, again, the tanks didn't have as much volume in each tank as the coal bunkers on Lusitania or Mauretania compared to the size of the ship. And then, those tanks were already filled with oil, a liquid. Oil is less dense than water, I'll give you that, but it's still quite heavy. So I don't see the Queen Mary sinking and capsizing just because some of her oil tanks are punctured. I just don't see that happening. Matthew Richards says the ballroom was turned into a shop, then a cinema, the kitchen after Long Beach, if I got that correct. Yeah, okay, now you've definitely reminded me. Yeah, it was turned into the first class cinema. Yeah, and then Long Beach got rid of the cinema and turned it into a kitchen for the Chelsea Chowder House restaurant. Goofy Roll says, my company had Christmas party in the Queen Mary's ballroom many years ago. Is it gone now? I doubt it, Goofy Rolls, because the ballroom was removed in 1947. So unless you had your party before World War II, you didn't use the ballroom. You probably used the first class main lounge. People call that a ballroom for some reason. It's not. It's not a ballroom. But you wouldn't be the first person who called it a ballroom. So when people tell me, oh, I've seen the ballroom on Queen Mary, they're usually talking about the first class main lounge. So that was probably the room that you and your party was using for Christmas. No, yeah, Goofy Rules. I understand the politics. I don't blame you for that. There's a lot of people who I'm sour about the politics too. It's upsetting. That things turned out the way that they did. It shouldn't have been that way. The Queen Mary should have been taken care of from the start. I mean, as Karthik says, do you think Queen Mary or any other ship would have broken in half if they were in the place of Titanic? I mean, if all the conditions were the same, and the ship started lifting out of the water, yeah. Sorry, don't mean to yawn. But yeah, I do think any ship that's lifted out of the water, the way Titanic did, would have broken in half. it's just a lot of weight, to lift out. So, yeah. We often think of our vehicles as a solid object, right? We look at a car. If a forklift were to lift a car, the whole thing goes up as one piece. Same thing with lifting up this teapot. It comes up as one piece. Lifting a table, it moves as one piece. But a lot of people don't think of ocean liners that way. An ocean liner, you can't just lift it from one spot and expect the whole thing to move with it. Ocean liners are so big that really they require support all the way down the length of the ship to prevent it from getting damaged. The fact that Titanic even made it out of the water before it broke in half was a testament to how strong the ship really was. But when you have something as big as an ocean liner, it's a solid object, but it doesn't move like a solid object. Queen Mary, Titanic, those ships were so big that they needed to be supported all the way down the length of the ship. So lifting out of the water would have broken any ship in half. Even to this day, if an Oasis of the Seas was to start sinking down by the head and its stern lifted out of the water, you can bet that thing would just snap in half. Probably much easier than Titanic did. Because the objects are just so large, and it's almost pointless to design them to be super solid to the point where God could lift it with one hand and it would just stay in shape, They don't need to be that strong. They just need to be strong enough to withstand cresting waves and stuff like that. So that's why Titanic broke in half. And a lot of people don't think about that. They think of objects that we build as something solid. So yeah, but really, what was I trying to say? I forget. But oh, Mike has to leave. See you later, Mike. Goofy Will says, I'm old, but not that old. Thanks, Alex. Yeah. Titanic Gaming says, I made a fictional ship at 1,500 feet and 34 knots. Let's say it rivals with Queen Mary. If the two liners were put in rivalry, who would win the rivalry? I mean, back then what mattered was how luxurious the ship was and how fast it was. So if your fictional ship offered a very comfortable and inviting and beautiful interior, and it was fast at 34 knots, then yeah, probably your ship would be the most popular, to be honest. Yeah. Keith says, oh my god, just watch the video from your other channel on the train layout. I can't believe you lost the loco 2 times with Sophie. Yeah, last night, my friend Chris, he had, for various reasons, he had the locomotive running at full throttle, and both times it got away from him and just went down the track. We chased it for miles. We chased it for miles looking for the locomotive. Unbelievable. And he goes and tries to blame me. No, I do not accept. I haven't even touched the sandwiches yet. Thankfully, the tea is still somewhat warm. So the Cunard tea sets, they had 2 different types of teapots. This one is the small one. It's enough for filling a teacup twice, with a little extra to spare. The other one was taller, and it was designed, I think, for 4 teacups. And yeah, And you know, if you were with somebody or something and you only wanted one teapot, that's what they would use it for. So apparently the taller ones are much more rare. Titanic Gaming says, what if Queen Mary sunk? What would be the casualties? I actually made a video about that. It's called What If Queen Mary Hit Titanic's Iceberg? And in that video I explain exactly what would happen in a sinking scenario with the Queen Mary. So if you go and watch that, you can learn about how the Queen Mary would have handled a situation where it was sinking. Really interesting video, actually. Crittenden says, would QE2 beat Queen Mary in speed? To my knowledge, no. QE2 had a top speed, I think, of like 30 knots. Let me double check that really quick. Let's see here. Come on. QE2 top speed. Oh, 32.5 knots. Oh, QE2 is pretty fast then. This was increased to 34 knots when the vessel was re-engined with a diesel-electric power plant. Interesting. So when the QE2, first came out, she was capable of a top speed of 32.5 knots. The Queen Mary had a top speed of 32.84 knots. So actually the Queen Mary would have beat the QE2 in speed. But when the QE2 was given new diesel-electric engines, her speed was increased to 34 knots. So the QE2 then would have beat the Queen Mary in speed. Alrighty. Keith says, I've also got ON30 trains. I've got a 2662 with a logging train here in New Zealand, and I have 2 1/5 scale live steam locomotives. Have you been to Train Mountain? I've never been to Train Mountain. But yeah, I'm a little too large to fit on those little trains anymore, frankly. So, last time I was on a miniature train like that was at Griffith Park in Los Angeles. And, yeah, that was difficult. Carl says, is QE2 still in service? No. QE2 was retired in 2008, and she is now a floating hotel in Dubai. So you can visit her in Dubai. I heard the rates are actually pretty decent. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name. Did you hear about SS Princess Alice, a side-wheeler that broke in half on the Thames in the middle of actual polluted sewage after a collision with another ship, and it killed 700 people? No, I never heard of that, actually. I do know the Thames was very polluted with sewage, so that is, yeah, that part is actually gross. Sunk in sewage. Thomas Brooks says, what do you like better, Edwardian, interwar, or World War II period ships? Well, I don't like World War II period ships. I like ships only before World War II. So I would say Oh, I would say the number of ships that I like tend to be more in the Edwardian age. So, just due to the sheer number of ships that I like, I'd have to vote for Edwardian. But that being said, there are a few interwar ships that I really, really like. So yeah, just not as many of them as the Edwardian ships. But I mean, I would take, Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth over, Olympic or over Olympic and over Mauretania. So, yeah, it's hard to say which one I like more, but yeah, by number, I like Edwardian ships more, but by amount that I like, it would be interwar ships. Carl says, she's younger than Queen Mary too. Why did she stop? No, the QE2 is much, much older than Queen Mary 2. The QE2 went into service in 1969, and she had a full 40 years, 41 years to be exact. She was at sea for 41 years. So she had a full life, and the Queen Mary 2 is not even 20 years old yet. So I think the Queen Mary 2 turns 20 years old in, let's say, 2024. So 2 more years, and she'll turn 20. So yeah, the QE2 was really old, and she had a long life at sea. Titanic Gaming, if you want to show me a picture of the ship, the best way to do it is to email me, and my email address is below. S. Karthik says, which ship's end hurt you the most? For me, it's the Olympic and Carpathia. I would have to say, I mean, the way that they ended. Let me try to think. I suppose the Oceanic from 1899, that had a sad end, and I thought it was a beautiful ship. That had a pretty sad end. The Queen Elizabeth from 1938, she met a sad end in 1972. So that, that was pretty major. And then one of my favorite ships is the Mauretania from 1907. She lived a very long career, but she was scrapped in the end, and that is pretty sad. Sorry. Sneezing. Yeah, Carpathia is a really sad ending. Carpathia was a beautiful ship on its own, I better have some of these sandwiches. They've just been sitting here. Still cold, though. Then again, it's cold in the house. The dill makes the egg sandwiches taste better. Titanic Gaming asks if I've been to USS Iowa. No, I haven't, actually. I do know the USS Iowa. I've heard about it. I've seen a lot of pictures, that kind of thing. It also has Yarrow boilers, just similar to the Queen Mary. Not 100%, but, was Yarrow. That kind of thing. So I'm not much of a warships person. I like ocean liners, but I don't like warships or cargo ships. It's just not my thing. I like ocean liners because of the style, the architecture, and the artistry. I've been on a few warships in my life. So I've been on the SS Jeremiah O'Brien, which is a Liberty ship. I've been on what is it? There's a large ship in San Diego Harbor. I want to say it starts with an M. It's like USS. I can't remember the name anymore. Been on that. Midway? Midway? Am I talking about Midway? I forget. And then one more. There was one more ship I've been on. Well, I know I've been inside of a submarine once. A decommissioned submarine. I don't remember what it was. I'm pretty sure it was a United States submarine. Don't remember. Titanic Gaming says Missouri. Is the USS Missouri in San Diego? I wasn't aware that it was. Yeah, NCC says Midway. Yeah, I knew it was. Yeah, Midway. Midway. Oh, yeah, the USS Missouri is in Pearl Harbor, yeah. Oh, so another video that's coming out. So, I told you guys that Saturday, that video is about how the Queen Mary is ballasted. That's not the title yet. I don't have a title for it yet. But before that, on Friday, is a video about narrow gauge railroads. So this train set behind me is themed after a narrow gauge railroad. But yeah, so there's a video on Friday coming out about narrow gauge railroads and, you know, why I like them, what they're all about, what they're for. So look out for that as well. So 2 videos, one on Friday, which is tomorrow, and one on Saturday, and then a live stream for tea time on Sunday, and then Tuesday is my Benson Hotel video, an actual history video. So you'll really like that one. You know what's going on? I have these bright lights to illuminate my face and illuminate all this, and the camera is in between them. And I look at the camera to look at you guys, and I practically blind myself. So when I look at my screen, all I see is like these white spots, and I'm like, I can't see. Elika Pika says, Alex, from 1780 to 1990, the Matson Line, currently a cargo company, served Hawaii and the Pacific coast of the USA until planes could fly in. Oh, pretty cool. I'd never heard of that, Matson Line. RMS Queen Mary asks, are all United States ships SS or some RMS? Well, RMS stands for Royal Mail Ship, which means that they carry the UK's Royal Mail. But that only a British ship, or ship that is, ship of the Great British Empire, only one of those can be called RMS, because the Royal Mail Service, they only contract. So how do I say this? I'm always at a loss for words of how to describe something. But when the U.S. sends out mail on a ship, or used to, they didn't have designations for that like the UK did. The UK had a designation, RMS, Royal Mail Ship. But the United States doesn't have that. It was just, the ship just carried mail. But a United States ship cannot be labeled RMS because it does not belong to Great Britain. It belongs to the United States. So only British ships of the British Empire, even back then extending out to Australia and Canada and all that, those could be labeled RMS. But that's the only way how. So you couldn't just label any ship RMS. It was only British ships that carried the Royal Mail. Let's see. S. Karthik says, could Olympic have survived for more years if she went a small overhaul? Like if they did not want her to continue as an ocean liner, sell it to British Navy and install some new engines and use in World War II. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying in one of my videos, which is, if you put in the effort, it will last as long as the effort you put in. So, you know, if you want it to last longer or a certain period of time and you put in the effort to make it happen, it will. But that being said, they didn't know World War II was coming, so if they had known, they probably would have made Olympic sit in the scrapyard a bit longer and waited to see if they needed her. But they would not have used her as a cruiser, not for the Navy. She would have been a troop ship. And the reason why, or a hospital ship, one of those two. But the reason why is ocean liners do not make for good cruisers or, you know, whatever. They don't make for good ships like that. They're just not built that way. So Olympic could have been used in World War II as a troop ship or a hospital ship. But that being said, they never saw it coming. So she was just scrapped, you know, and she was really expensive to operate, and even if World War II was coming, I don't know if they would have actually invested the money to refurbish Olympic to make her useful for the war. That would have been a lot of money for something. I mean, who knows? They were so desperate. Maybe they would have, you know? They were so desperate for extra ships during World War II. So who knows? Maybe they would have if they had known it was coming. Oh yeah, Matthew, you're talking about the Union Pacific big boy. Madeline, how you doing? Madeline says, hi Alex, late to the party, but hope you're having a groovy Thursday. I am indeed. Yep. Oh gosh. More of this to go. Chris with a K is here. Says, I'd say they would have converted RMS Olympic into a troop ship, but just like other slower troop ships of the time, she most likely would have been sunk by enemy subs. I can agree with that. Those older ships were getting sunk left and right. NCC says that there was a group that wanted to turn Olympic into a hotel, but it didn't happen. That's true. A lot of people ask me, why didn't they preserve more ships back then, like Olympic or Mauretania, stuff like that? And it's actually a really simple answer, When you think about it, you see this water kettle here. If this, let's say I've had this for a couple of years, and it gets worn out, and it doesn't heat water as well, and for the most part, I just want a new one, right? We wouldn't think twice before throwing this away, Obviously, if there was a way to fix it, we could, but let's just say there wasn't a way for an average person like me to fix it, to make it perfectly new again. We would just think about throwing it away. But the thing is that, it's meaningless to me if it's broken. And it's old, Newer ones probably might have fancier gadgets in them or something. But there'd be no way to know if in 50 years this particular model and this particular brand ends up being worth a lot of money. There's no way for me to know, because the future hasn't happened yet. So there's no telling if this is worthless after it's broken, or if it just existing could be worth a lot of money in the future. Or heck, maybe there might be some reason in the future why that kettle might be valuable to, might have some kind of social value. Don't know. There's no way to know. So when it comes to the ships back then, ocean liners, if we're talking 1920s, 1930s, ocean liners in the 20s and 30s were commonplace. They were everywhere. So getting rid of one old ocean liner like Olympic or Mauretania, it was seen as a shame because they were perfectly lovely vessels, but nobody could have foreseen that 100 years later, there wouldn't be ocean liners at all. And those old ships would have been super valuable as museums. Really, most people couldn't see it. So back then, Olympic would have been useful as a hotel, they thought, but it was also very expensive. And so basically they said, well, if it's so expensive, we can't raise the money for it then. And it's not really worth anything because it's just another old ocean liner. It has a history, true, but for the most part, it was just another old ocean liner that fought in the war. But like I said, today, 100 years later, we know better. We know that these ships were worth a lot to our history as museums and artifacts of war and of peacetime. So that's the reason why, for anybody who wonders why more ocean liners were not saved, it was because, frankly, they were all gone by the time people started to realize that they were worth something. So, Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, the whole reason why they survived, the scrapping torches was because by the 1960s, everybody knew ocean liners were going out. They were, ocean liners were not going to be a thing anymore. People saw it coming by the late 1960s. So they realized that if Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth get retired, they're going to be valuable for history, for preservation, for their art and artistry. So, Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, people wanted to buy them, and they were bought and taken to various places to be used as hotels and stuff. So that's why, Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth survived ultimately, but Queen Elizabeth burned down in 1972. But the point is that that's why they were originally saved from the scrappers. But ships like Olympic and Mauretania, they weren't saved because, frankly, ocean liners were just commonplace, another one would have come along, you know. And they did. The Queen Mary came along. So... I feel like I missed a lot of comments here. Matthew Richard says, I've seen a newscast from the time that spoke of how sad they were to see Mauretania and Olympic go, and regrets that they couldn't have used them for war. Roosevelt himself was sad. Oh yeah. There definitely were people who were very sad about the outcome of those ships. Titanic Gaming says, how valuable will Queen Mary be in 5,000 years? I don't know. I mean, I just explained how I have no idea if that kettle will be valuable in 50 years. I can't predict 5,000 years, but what I can tell you is I don't personally believe ocean liners will make a comeback the way that they used to, not with the way flying is, and people are eventually going to have their own flying vehicles, and eventually, you know, getting from one place to another will be done by flying a lot more frequently and a lot easier and a lot faster than it ever was before. So I don't see ocean liners making as big a comeback as they used to. Maybe more as doubling as cruise ships, the way Queen Mary 2 is. So with that being said, I think that the rarity of ocean liners will make the original Queen Mary even more valuable in 5,000 years if she's still around. I doubt she will be. I think that I personally believe the Queen Mary will probably last for at most 100 years from this point. And I think by the end of that 100 years, she will probably see the cutting torches by then. Because while I do believe that there are certain landmarks that will live on and on, you know, who knows, maybe the Golden Gate Bridge probably has another 200 years in it if they keep repairing it. The Queen Mary, she could keep going on if they keep repairing it, but I do believe that the lasting legacy of the Queen Mary might fade in 100 years to the point where it's not necessary to keep her around anymore. So, but then again, predicting the future is always the hardest thing, because most people are wrong, unless you're Family Guy. Let's see. Yeah, Mark Hooper says, Alex, it's the same for cars. Who back in 1964 would have dreamed that the Generation 1 Ford Mustang would be so valuable today? So many were rusted out by the 70s, but in hindsight, that was a shame. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same with Liberty ships, only a handful left. Cunard says, RMS Aquitania held the record for length of time in service, 36 years. RMS Cynthia, I think that's how it's pronounced, surpassed her 6 years later with 37 years. And then QE2 beat them both when she retired in 2008. Yep. That means QE2 was 39 years at sea, right? I don't know why I thought it was 41. It was 39 years, wasn't it? Oh, was Titanic Gaming talking about Queen Mary 2? Okay. Yeah. I don't think... You know, I like the idea that maybe when Queen Mary 2 retires, maybe she'll be turned into a floating hotel as well. I mean, I think she has more potential to be a floating hotel than the original QE2 did. And she is a floating hotel. So I think that the Queen Mary 2 will definitely be a floating hotel when she retires. Only because she's very beautiful, she's very well built, So she's built to last. Cruise ships don't often turn into hotels because they're somewhat cheaply built. They're like the RVs of the ocean-going world. But Queen Mary 2 is like the luxury bus of the ocean-going world. So, luxury buses, they have a better chance of lasting longer. Of course, that's probably a poor metaphor because there's lots of people who have old, outdated, non-functional RVs in their backyard. Yeah, poor example. See you later, Titanic Gaming. NCC asks, have you heard of Princess Marguerite II, the last coastal liner, retired in 1989? If it's the one I'm thinking of, then yeah. It was for the Canadian Pacific Line, if that's right. John M. Spencer says, aloha. Hello, John M. Spencer. Goofy Roll says, people don't realize just how hostile the open ocean is. It's amazing ships last as long as they do. Yeah, it is. It really is. To us, 20, 40 years doesn't sound that long. But when you consider what ships have to go through on the open ocean, it's amazing they last as long as they do. Alika Pika says, did you see my profile comments? I don't know what you mean by profile comments, but I did see the comments you've been posting up above, talking about the Matson line and all that. I just don't have anything to add to it because I don't know what the Matson line is, and I'm reading what you're saying, but I don't have anything to add to it, so. But it is interesting. Oh, okay. As Karthik says, I don't know why, but Queen Mary 2's hull looks like a bathtub. Well, I mean, you're not wrong. It does kind of look like a bathtub. But I still prefer its hull over, like, the hull of a cruise ship. RMS Queen Mary, the purpose of a bulbous bow is to cancel out the forces of the bow wave. So when any ship goes through water, the front of the bow causes a pressure in the front of the ship, and the water creates a wave. That wave gets split by the bow, goes down the length of the bow, creating multiple waves. This doubles the surface area of the water touching the ship, which creates double the drag. And so, to reduce the drag on the ship's hull and make it more efficient, not necessarily faster, I mean, it can help make the ship go faster, but mostly it's for efficiency, to decrease. The goal is to decrease the bow wave, so that way the ship glides through the water with less power necessary. But anyway, so in order to cancel out the bow wave, and this is really complex, but basically, let's say this is the ship's hull, the side of it, and the wave comes over it, it hits the front and then goes down the sides like that. Well, with a bulbous bow being at the front, the wave goes over the top and then it comes down. Before it hits the front of the bow, by then it's already canceled out. So if you think about it this way, when the wave goes to the front of the bow, it then comes down. But with the bulbous bow there, it's almost like having two bows. And so it hits the bulbous bow. By the time it comes down, it gets canceled out by hitting the front of the actual bow of the ship. So I know that was a really poor explanation, but that's all I have without showing you graphics of how it works. But essentially, it cancels out the bow wave of the ship, creating a flatter line down the length of the entire ship, which decreases the amount of drag the ship is undergoing, and that makes it more efficient for the ship to get through the water. It can result in a slightly faster speed, but mainly bulbous bows are there to just make the ship glide through the water a bit easier with less power, thereby saving fuel. So let's see here. Thomas Brooks says, I don't much like the semicircle square stern of the Queen Mary 2. The rest looks nice. Yeah, I agree about the stern of the Queen Mary 2. I always tell my friend Chris, I'm like, I don't understand why they couldn't have just... I mean, I know why the stern of the ship has to be square. Most cruise ships and stuff, they have square sterns because that actually helps prevent rolling as much. Okay, I'll just add that little bit at the end, as much. It decreases the amount of rolling because it creates more surface area that touches the water. So me and my friend Chris have been talking about this for months. And but they wanted to give the Queen Mary 2 the same kind of stern that the original Queen Mary and the QE2 had. They were looking for that fancy-looking stern with the rounded shape. And so, basically, they decided to tack on, a curved stern to it. But they didn't meld the two shapes together. They didn't meld the squared-off shape with the roundness of the stern. And that bothers me to no end. I'm like, it looks like they just like took the stern of another ship with a rounded stern, and then they just kind of glued it on to the original ship, which is probably closer to how it was actually done. So yeah, I agree. The stern of the Queen Mary 2 looks a bit wonky because of that problem, but Alika Pika says, what is your thoughts on streamlined locomotives? Would you ever have a model of one on your railroad? No, I'm mostly a fan of locomotives from before the year 1900. And generally, the locomotives I like are smaller. I tend to like narrow gauge locomotives a lot more than standard gauge. So I'm very, very specific about the locomotives I like. Streamlined locomotives are nice, but I don't have a particular, not a particular interest in them. So I would never put it on my train layout because my train layout will be themed to the 1890s, and those streamlined locomotives, they're from the 1930s, so 20s and 30s. So this would be only 1890s rolling stock and stuff like that. So Victorian era stuff. As Karthik says, Alex, if you had an imaginary ship in your mind, how would it look? What would be the ideal ocean liner for you? Oh, don't get me started on it. I can't. We're already at the end of the live stream. I can't spend a whole bunch of time talking about it, but I have tried to imagine what I thought a good-looking cruise ship would look like. Not a cruise ship, I'm sorry. An ocean liner of modern day. I have tried to think about what it would look like. But frankly, I was trying to think of one that would look like a classic ocean liner, but would have the same kind of capacity that would be required in modern days. You need a whole lot of passengers. Like the capacity of the original Queen Mary is not enough for her size. She would need to have a much larger capacity, at least double, to make a profit in this day and age. But every time I try to come up with an idea, it looks ugly to me. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Chris says, I was watching a video about it. According to the person who designed the ship, the stern is a combination of efficiency and smoothness in the ocean. What does that even mean? It's a combination of efficiency and smoothness. What part of it is efficient? And what part of it is smooth? That doesn't sound like an answer to me. Crittenden, it would be the Queen Mary. Queen Mary is my favorite ship, my favorite ocean liner of all time. So if I could sail on one, it would be the Queen Mary. Goofy Roll says, do you like Shea engines? Not really, no. Generally, I like 440s, Porters, and Forney style engines. So this engine here is a Forney style engine, and then I have a Porter right over there. I wanted to get a 440 for this layout, but it's really expensive. It's like $300, and I'm like, forget it. I'm not spending $300 on a 440, but yeah, so I tend to like Porters, 440s, and Forney engines. Usually in narrow gauge is my preference. Alright. Chris with a K says, I'll explain the Queen Mary 2 stern design to you later. I don't know how to compress it into 200 characters. Okay. Well, I do have to end the live stream now because we are well over 2 hours and 20 minutes for sure. But anyway, look out for several videos this weekend, you guys. I have a video tomorrow about my favorite kinds of trains, so narrow gauge stuff, that kind of thing. Then Saturday is a video about the Queen Mary and how it's ballasted to stay upright in the water today. And then Tuesday, well, let's not forget, Sunday is the next tea time at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And then Tuesday will be the Benson Hotel video. Pretty sure. Unless I replace it with a different video. That depends, because a lot of people are telling me that they're available on weekends. So I'm thinking maybe I should stick to the big videos on weekends and the smaller videos throughout the week. So I'm still trying to decide, but I will technically have the Benson Hotel video done by Tuesday. I just don't know if that's a good day to publish it. But yeah, so keep an eye out for that. Lots of videos coming, you guys. So anyway, after the Benson Hotel video is published, you can bet the next major history video I'll be working on is about the H4 Hercules, also known as the Spruce Goose, built by Howard Hughes. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching, you guys, and I'll see you all on Sunday. Bye-bye.